I always wanted to be a teacher when I started school.
We're here for the students, and we want what's best for the student.
And I love watching people learn.
The teacher, student, academics, curriculum, whatever, that center post, the one that keeps this education together.
So hi, and welcome to the Last Best Learning Podcast, a podcast designed for Montana's educators, where our mission is to deliver digestible, relevant, professional learning, honoring your capacity in an increasingly busy world. If there's a topic or speaker you'd like to hear from, we'd love to hear from you. Our state's educators empower minds, elevate futures, and inspire self-discovery, and we walk beside them. We're your hosts, Michelle McCarthy,
Claire Mikeson,
and Katrina Engeldrum,
OPI Science, ELA, and Math Coordinators.
Well, hi, Michelle. This is kind of flipping the script. Normally we have a speaker on, but today we are the guests. So I was hoping that you could give our listeners some updates on what's new for science.
Okay, so science standards are not being redone right now. There isn't anything that I would say is new with science, but I would like to inform everyone on the resources that you can find on the science website. The science website QR code is in the slide deck. On the science webpage, there are opportunities for educators, so they can find grant work that can pay them or professional learning that can pay them. They can find opportunities for in their classroom. They can find resources. They can also find any environmental education group that actually can work hand in hand with you in the classroom, prompt or enrich a lesson that you're already doing.
Do they have to be a secondary educator in order to access these resources, or are there things available for our elementary teachers as well?
There are resources available for K-12 that we do not have any preschool resources that I'm aware of. I know like the Butterfly House in Missoula, they do professional learning, or they'll reach out to classrooms and do butterflies, which I suppose could be preschool, but I don't think that it would meet any standards for that.
Okay, and the $1 million question all of our science educators are probably wondering, because their heads are spinning with all of the standards updates. Are science getting an update also? Should people be kind of aware of that?
Right now, it's to be determined. There is not a scheduled date. There was, under the last administration, a tentative time, but I'm not even going to say it out loud because we need to know for sure. And so right now, it is not scheduled. So
Thanks, Michelle.
That's all I have for science. So
You're the easy one.
I am the easy one because I don't have standards changing right now. So Katrina, I'll flip it on you. Why don't you talk to us about what's going on with math?
So math is changing a lot. We are starting implementation July 2026. So if this is brand new news to you, you need to check out the Math Revision website and the Math Standards website, where we have all of the resources. But I'm guessing that most of the listeners have heard some whispers and rumors about this, so this won't be quite as shocking. We did revise both the practice standards and the content standards. I won't go too into depth about all of the minute changes and everything, but there are a ton of resources. You can access the guidance documents for PK-12. Those are ready. There's also some communications one-pagers that I think are really helpful for people who are trying to involve individuals at multiple levels of education in these revisions and understanding exactly what school board members are supposed to be doing versus classroom teachers versus families and students and so on and so forth. So we have some materials for those. And then I will plug that we have a lot of professional learning coming up. We have 2 webinar series starting in August. The first one is the one that's hosted by OPI. So I'll be walking teachers. This is really focused on school-based educators. So that also includes our administrators and our curriculum directors and things like that. But I'll be walking you all through how to go through the implementation process, kind of step by step. They're 1 hour a month, and they're on the 3rd Thursday of every month. The other webinar is put on in partnership with OPI by Data Science for Everyone, which is a group who is really interested in increasing data literacy across the country. And they have offered to provide some extra training to our teachers on the increased emphasis on data literacy, in particular in the standards. So they're helping fill that specific area of the shifts, and they are hosting trainings the second Tuesday of every month. August is a little bit of an exception because of a scheduling conflict. So that one is the third Tuesday. But you can access the registration links for these on those websites that I referenced a moment ago, which again should be popping up on the screen while we're having this conversation.
Great. If you had to describe what are the biggest changes, either in elementary or in high school, what would be the biggest changes you want people to be thinking about with mathematics?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Michelle. I think most teachers will say that K-8 didn't experience any huge temporal shifts, right? There's a couple of tiny shifts like the addition of time and money, an increased emphasis on kind of data literacy at lower levels than before, things like that. But most of the standards really just got cleaned up and refined rather than experiencing a huge categorical change across the whole standards. With high school, we have a little bit more of a kind of structural shift, which can cause some more time needing to be spent on alignment and what that all looks like. I would say in high school, there's more implications just because of that structural change. And in the high school, content-wise, what you'll notice is a removal of a lot of standards that had limited applications, things like matrices and vectors that, even though they're very important for advanced mathematics learners and taking courses in college that are advanced, they're not really what the average student in Montana needs to know in order to graduate or even to get accepted to college. They really kind of removed those from the required standards and made them recommendations for advanced courses. And they swapped those with more emphasis on data literacy, which is something that in educational spaces and in workspaces is kind of becoming more and more prevalent with our technology shifts and our cultural changes. So those are kind of the things I would say to look out for. And then, of course, we have PK-12 math practice standards, which affect everybody. And those are completely new and revised. And those will need to be looked at as well, because they include things like a culturally connect math practice, a collaborate math practice, which were not at all in skills that we were working on with the previous set of math practices, even though teachers were probably doing those things in their classrooms.
Yeah, teachers actually do more than what's asked of them. And the standards themselves are the bare minimum that's asked. So that is a common thing. One more question I had for you, Katrina, is if you had to tie in careers towards the standards that have been changed, is there something that pops in your mind where that's a definite connection for educators? I'm thinking more high school.
What exactly are you meaning?
I'm thinking that, I know that like if kids are in CTE and it's more work oriented, right? And the mathematics that goes into whether they're in shop or welding or whatever is aligned with that career. I'm wondering, does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
like how does CTAE pop up in the standards, and like how are we working to make more cohesion between those types of courses? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And with
Thank you.
And also with the heavy addition of data science.
Yeah.
What is that preparing students for? So that was kind of that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a little slow on the uptake, I guess. Thank you for your patience with me. So I guess I would say there's kind of two main things happening. The first is the research is really showing a shift is necessary away from the calculus-centric kind of pathway that students have been traditionally taking in schools, and shifting more toward a more open pathway that allows a lot of those extra courses like technical math, which might align better with a student's career aspirations, or like a statistics course, which again, if they're seeking a career in like a data field, even a like police field or criminal law or something like that, we would want to see them more in those kind of data-driven aspects. What we've done with that is we've created some guidance on if a student's looking at certain careers, which math classes should they have access to. So that's one thing. And what the research also is showing is that when kids have access to more opportunities, they actually end up having more confidence in their mathematical skills. And honestly, sometimes the research is also showing a little bit more connectivity to the school environment, which is something that's a social emotional aspect that's coming into play. Definitely, there's a shift there. The other question you asked was specifically about data science and how that's kind of popping up in careers, right? And how it's showing up in math. With that component, what you'll see is the research. Again, I'm citing the REL handouts that were prepared for the standards committee, so you can access those on the website as well. But there's one in particular that talks in depth about data science and its importance in our world. And one of the most interesting pieces from that research brief actually was referencing what human resources fields are kind of saying about candidates for jobs and how they're lacking the ability to use data and engage in data analysis. And yet that is a growing need in all fields, not just new. A lot of people think that, oh, data science, that must be one of those fancy AI, or I need a computer programming degree or something to engage with. And what they're noticing is that it's actually popping up in traditional fields like nursing, social work, teaching, things like that, a lot more than it ever has been before. So we are trying to prepare students for that future that is so heavily leaning on the ability to engage with and understand data.
Thank you for sharing that. And I just need to say, since I'm the science person, that tons of science fields need data science. And I recently went to a STEM summit, or this last spring, and it was like 35% of future jobs would require a STEM component. So just throwing that on there. So I'll give you a break now, Katrina. Thank you for all that information. Okay, so I'm going to pick on you now, Claire. Can you just give us a brief update on what's going on with the English language arts?
Yeah, so the English standards are currently in the adoption phase with the Board of Public Education. So they went through the task force revision last year in 2024 and the negotiated rulemaking committee earlier this year. So we expect that those new standards will be adopted in September. Right now, the plan was to implement them along with math in 2026, but they're planning now to move that later. So we're not exactly sure whether those are going to be implemented in 2027 or 2028, but that was proposed to kind of make sure that schools aren't busy implementing math and ELA at the same time, because that's a lot of new standards and probably a lot of resources financially to put on schools. So that's the plan with those. It sounds like they didn't quite change as much as maybe the math standards, but I'll tell you guys a few shifts, a few major shifts that were happening for those ELA standards. So they didn't have, like, math practices has been in those math standards since 2011. ELA hasn't had literacy practices, but they are in this version of the standards. So they added literacy practices that have some similarities to math, strategic technology use, skills like collaboration and creativity. A lot of these skills that teachers are probably already doing quite frequently. So it's kind of just a reminder of these best practices and these skills that students will need that will help them succeed in the classroom and also out of the classroom and in careers and college education. So those are new for ELA. Probably the biggest change is that they're way shorter. So there were so many ELA standards and they really got condensed for clarity. So a lot of them were kind of combined. The domains of reading literature and reading information were also combined, which is kind of a cool shift, I think, to emphasize this fact that cognitive processes and these reading strategies that we use are often driven by the text, and there's not just like informational or literature. There's a lot of sort of subgenres within those and similarities between them as well. We're also planning to create guidance documents. So definitely not as fleshed out as Katrina has done on those, but that is in the plan. And I'm lucky to have her as sort of my guide to those guidance documents. So I can model those off of what she has created in collaboration with other Montana educators and groups here at OPI. Another change is that foundational reading standards were originally in grades K through 5 and now, or maybe it was K through 6, but they expanded those through 12th grade to really emphasize those reading skills at the junior high level and high school level so that educators are prepared when students struggle with reading at those levels. So research was done by REL again to emphasize what are the foundational reading practices and things that educators should be focusing on, both in elementary, so a little more science of reading added at those levels as well, and then in the upper levels, primarily in the form of like morphology. Let's see, the language standards were absorbed into the reading and writing domains, so they don't exist on their own anymore. They're kind of spread throughout, which mirrors how teachers are actually teaching them in practice. So that's a great change, I think, too. And with our focus on IFA, the task force tried to be very specific in which content standard that aligned best with. So there's more thoughtful integration of where that focus should land, as well as an additional research and inquiry standard that's focused specifically on IFA, which I'm excited to see how that will develop and what the resources for that will be. Yeah, those are the main changes with the ELA standards.
Thank you. Can one of you share with me what the REL or REL, can you
I was thinking that
explain?
too.
Because, yeah, our listeners might not know what that stands for.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So the REL is the Regional Education Laboratory, and it is a basically a research group that is funded by the U.S. Department of Education, and they help our standards revision process and some other projects that have happened at the OPI as well, mostly by conducting research across the US and sometimes even the globe when we just don't have the capacity as a state to do that ourselves. They help other states as well, not just Montana, but they're pretty well respected. And if you look at their briefs that they've put together for any of the content areas, you'll see that they're incredibly thorough in what they do.
And I just wanted to say, I believe all of the research that they've done for us, at least for math and ELA, is also available on the websites for rate.
Yes, yes, yep, definitely available up there.
Yeah.
Before we go to, I think I want to address a common myth or misconception that happens a lot because we've talked a lot about new standards and shifting and I think teachers probably can pick up on that there's going to be some changes in instruction as a result of that. So I'm wondering if we can all kind of discuss when a lot of teachers feel like when we have these kinds of shifts that they need to run out and buy a new curriculum. Can we talk a little bit about that concept, that idea, and maybe what teachers could do or what schools could do if there's just not funding for that, or if they've already just gone through that process and aren't ready to go through it again?
I think that's a great idea. Claire, you want to jump in? What
Sure,
can the educators do?
So in the case of ELA, a lot of the content of the standards remains the same. So it's kind of about identifying practices more so even than research, but also, more so even than resources, but also supplementary resources. So for those standards that have added additional foundational reading standards, focusing on things like phonemics or morphology that oftentimes elementary teachers are pretty familiar with already, but high school teachers maybe not so much. Speaking from my own experience, it can just be about learning what that is and using the resources and the texts that you already have to focus on that skill. Same with the IFA integration. That's often not something, unfortunately, that will be in a lot of the curriculum that schools purchase, but there are supplementary resources available to integrate.
I like that you brought that up, Claire, because I think there's some persisting belief that just because you buy a curriculum that says it's standards aligned, that it is actually standards aligned. And I want to clarify that no curriculum bought in the last 10 years has ever been fully aligned to the Montana standards, because we have EFA and other states don't. So that's kind of always been a thing that I think is very clear and makes sense to people. But also there is research that shows, regardless of EFA, just because a textbook company says that their curriculum addresses certain standards the way that they're supposed to be addressed doesn't necessarily agree with that conclusion. So you don't need to buy a new curriculum. You've probably been already revising what's in the curriculum and adapting it to your own teaching for years. So just continue that process. And I guess my advice would be to start with the standards themselves and find out when they're addressed in your content or your curriculum and materials, because they probably are in some way and might just need some fine tuning or refinement, which again is something educators already do in their natural practice.
I agree with Katrina. That's the place to start. And if you have the ability to, working with educators around the same grade levels would be very beneficial.
I agree. And if you don't have, like, if you're not in a school setting that has multiple teachers teaching the same grade level, I still think the work can be very powerful if you got together with a grade band and did the work, because you can also see a sense of vertical alignment appear through that process, which is also really impactful. So I would encourage people to, whatever makes sense in their school environment that they have, the way that they teach and the way their school is made up, just engage with the other teachers in the building, because it is too much work to do by yourself. And it is helpful when you can have an extra set of eyes.
Totally agree. Even our work is just too much by ourselves. So we work together as a group a lot.
Yeah,
it's just education. Well, do either of you have anything else to add?
I guess I want to share, since Katrina brought up vertical alignment, that there's a document on the ELA website, if we have any ELA teachers listening, that has those new standards aligned vertically, which are kind of beautiful to see, because that never really existed when I was teaching. So you can kind of go through domains and see like how that skill progresses K through 12.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The task did it all.
But we have some great educators in Montana.
Agreed.
We hope that we've shared some insights with you that will benefit you in the upcoming school year. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to help. If you have any ideas for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Please fill out the Qualtrics form linked in the description below and in the collaborative listener guide. Your input helps us provide meaningful content for Montana educators. Thanks for listening to us, and we hope you'll join us for our next episode. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep inspiring.